Saturday afternoon at around 4:30, I had confirmed with multiple sources that the Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor fight, the highly anticipated Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor fight, was all but done. Signed, sealed, and delivered, UFC 202, August 20th in Las Vegas. And so it's rare that when I break this news, I do so in the media room, but that's where I was when I reported it. When I confirmed it, and we'll get to this a little later. I don't sit on news. The last thing anyone should ever do is sit on news. If you have it confirmed, you got to go with it. If you're sitting on it, you're not doing it right. And, some people behind the scenes have tried to say that I've sat on news to, screw the UFC Tonight show. That's not true. It's hard to confirm news. Now, when I know that news is about to be broken, I'm digging. For example, UFC 200, which we'll get to in a second, I knew there was an open slot. So you could best believe that's a red light staring at me in the face. I'm going to go try to find that news. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I do. Everyone on our site has a role. My role is the host of this show, MMA Beat, the Fight Week interviews, and the news guy. I can't write like Sean Al-Shadi. I can't write like Chuck Mindenhall. I can't break down fights like Luke Thomas. I don't have ratings and that insight like Dave Meltzer. You get the point. And so that's my role, and I try to find the news and get it. So I got the Nate Diaz McGregor news. Well, I was hearing rumblings about Brock Lesnar, and I finally got it confirmed. Multiple sources. Again, I say this to anyone who wants to talk to me about journalism. You have to have it confirmed by multiple sources. You can't just have it confirmed by one. And preferably it can't be from the same side of the table, if you get what I'm saying. You have to have it confirmed by multiple people. You want to report something. I finally got that Brock Lesnar was close to signing a deal, or he was close to finalizing a deal to return at UFC 200. And I finally was able to confirm that around 5 o'clock. And so I posted that as well on the site. And again, it's awkward because you're sitting there in the press room. It's not usually a place where you do it. So then you report that, you tweet it out there, and people are now like, whoa, what's going on? The Conor-Nate thing, a member of the PR staff came up to me after I reported the Conor-Nate story and was kind of like, I don't know if this is right, I don't know are you sure about this? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. Again, I take a lot of pride in batting 1,000 and not getting things wrong. When you hear it from me, I hope until the day I die, it will be true. You can go to the bank with that. I mean, my second son's name is Walter. For a major reason why I wanted to call him Walter was because of Walter Cronkite. That's how much journalism means to me. And what was Walter Cronkite? He was, the most trusted man in America. Who was Walter Cronkite? That's who he was. I love the name, but I also love what that man stood for. That's what it means to me. I'm not playing around with this journalism thing. It means a lot to be trusted, to have that credibility. And so, when Colin Cowherd was saying to buy your tickets for September 17th, Mayweather-McGregor, I was taking that personally, because when I have a platform like this, when I'm able to talk to all of you, I'm not going to play games with you. I'm not going to let someone tell me something for negotiations to try to play games. No, if I tell you to buy tickets because it's a lock for September 17th, you best believe it's a lock. That means a lot to me. So I reported the Brock news. So that news comes out, and I was told, for the record, that they were going to break it on the broadcast. I did not include that in my story because I didn't really think it was necessary to include where it was going to be broken. I knew it was going to be done on ESPN, the opponent announcement, but I'm not trying to steal anyone's shine. If I have news and sit on it, I'm not doing my job. So I couldn't sit on that. But I didn't want to tell the world about the pay-per-view. That was their thing. All you needed to know at that time was that this is close to being a done deal. That elusive open slot for UFC 200 was about to be filled by a very big name. That's news to me. That's a big deal. And yeah, you can bet that, of course I want to get it first. That's part of the rush as well. But that's not at the expense of being wrong. I will never do that. I will never say or report or write something that might be right just so I can be first. I'd rather be last than be wrong. Right. So then I was being told that the UFC was upset that this came out. But nothing happened. I was in the back. I was watching the fights. Right before the main event, a member of the UFC PR staff came to me and said that Dana White wants to speak to you. Michael Bisping was about to fight Luke Rockhold. And I had a feeling that this wasn't going to be the most pleasant conversation. And I didn't feel like anything good was going to come out of it. So I said, look, I want to watch this fight. I want to cover it, if you get what I'm saying, take it in. Maybe after, I don't really want to go back and talk to him. A couple minutes later, a higher ranking PR person came to me in a very serious way and said, you must go to the back. I said the same thing. He said, you have to go to the back. I said, well, I'm not going to the back unless my colleague Casey can come with me. I didn't want to go alone. I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't going to go into that storm alone. After some back and forth, he agreed to let Casey come back with me. And I've thought about that a lot because of what happened to Casey that night, which I'll get to in a brief second. So we go to the back. It was just a hallway, a few steps from the media room. The main event's about to start, by the way. And Dana White is there. Some other members of his team are there. And he just says to me, you're out. Get out of here. You're done. We don't want you here anymore. Go to Bellator. I said, why? He said, you're too negative. I said, how is what I'm doing any different than all the other great sports journalists out there? Adrian Wojnarowski, Adam Schefter, Bob McKenzie, Ken Rosenthal. How is this any different? I was talking about a guy who was about to sign a contract to fight. I wasn't talking about super secretive stuff. I wasn't talking about the sale. I wasn't talking about disparaging things. I was talking regular fight news. And let's be honest, I mean, all of this is happening and people are, trying to say that I'm standing up for journalism and I'm this martyr and all this stuff. That's cool. And if you want to say that, fine. But it's all a little bit embarrassing because none of this is some great investigative journalism that I'm doing. I'm not going to win a Pulitzer for any of this. This is fight stuff. This is what we love to talk. This is barbershop stuff. Brock Lesnar is coming back. That's incredible. I'm not putting out there who they're negotiating with to sell the company. I'm not talking about, having WME as their representative in their sale talks. Goldman Sachs. I'm not talking about any of that. I never do. He said, you're too negative. He said, Lorenzo wanted you out of Fox and that happened and he wants you out of here and so you're out. Now I will say, a lot was said in this conversation. I think initially he just wanted it to be like, you're out, see you later. But a lot of things were said, and a lot of what I thought were pretty mean-spirited things were said. I'm not going to betray that trust, despite the fact that they did that, and I'm not going to repeat all of it. But when you have someone of Dana's stature saying the things that he said to me, it does affect you. And I said to him, look, Dana, as I've said in many interviews, and I've said on this show, I owe a lot to Dana White in particular. I really do. UFC 97, the first time I interviewed him, my microphone died. He said, go out and get another one. I'll be waiting here. And I went outside. I went in my car. I got another microphone. And he was still there when I came back. UFC 112, when Anderson Silva put on that weird performance, he interviewed with me. He's always given me the time of day. And it hurts me that this has happened. But maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm dreaming. I felt like deep down inside, he didn't want to do that. I think he was respecting the wishes of his partner, who I've never really had a close relationship with, and he was doing what he was essentially told. I don't think he was torn up over it. I think he was pretty upset that, I beat them to the punch, so to speak, but that's how I kind of felt in the moment. He also said that Brock Lesnar was really upset about the news. Now, it's interesting. Brock Lesnar went on ESPN SportsCenter today and said he doesn't know who I am. Of course, that's not true. That's Brock being Brock. He has said this many times before, the whole Undertaker thing. I don't really take offense to that, but I did ask some people if that was true about him being upset, and they said that couldn't be any further from the truth. Brock Lesnar is going to get paid a lot of money to fight at UFC 200. He couldn't care less who's reporting what. I think we know that by now when it comes to Brock. In the midst of this conversation, a PR person standing in back of Dana White said that I could have had the professional courtesy to run this by them. He said that Kevin Iole, who I also owe a lot to, who asked Dana White way back when, maybe 8 or so years ago, to credential me when it took them a year and a half to do so. He specifically said Kevin Iole would do that. And this stuck with me because they've also said this in the media afterwards, that I should have the professional courtesy to run this news by them first. This, to me, is an unbelievable line of thinking. Why? Well, how about the fact that the night before UFC 199, Brett Okamoto of ESPN asked Dana White if Brock was in negotiations to fight at UFC 200, and he told him no. So what's the difference 24 hours later? You think he was going to tell me that? You think he was going to tell me it was true when they had this cool promo and all this stuff planned? At best, I would have gone to no comment. I probably would have gone, don't report that, as I've gone in the past, and been forced to sit on things as I've done in the past. What's good that's going to happen? Prior to UFC 169, I got the news that Renan Barão was going to fight Dominic Cruz. And I went to the UFC and I asked him if this was true, and I was going to report it on UFC Tonight. You know what happened when I asked them? A couple hours later, Newsday reported it on a random Tuesday. Was that going to happen? Or did they want to give it to someone else? And I get what they do. Strategically, they want to go on ESPN. They want to put stuff in this paper, that paper. I get what they're doing. But what's going to happen if I ask them? They're not going to get me. They're not going to give me the green light. They're not going to say, okay, you can have this one. There's no way. I graduated from one of the very best journalism schools in the world, Syracuse University, the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications. And trust me, nowhere in the rule book does it say you have to run things by the organization when you're about to report them. What they do teach you is if you have at least 2 credible sources that are confirming this news and you feel strongly and are confident that this is right, you are good to go, no matter what it is. And let's go through my history of reporting news. What am I reporting? Again, this guy's fighting that guy, this guy's injured, that guy's contract's up. Really, let's talk about this news. So to hear that I should have had the professional courtesy to run something by them, to me is just mind-blowing. Because time and time again, we're either told no comment or we're just lied to. I asked the UFC if Rafael dos Anjos was injured prior to UFC 196. You know what I was told? Not true. Guess what? He was injured. And I knew he was injured. I knew for a fact that he was injured. They were already talking about Nate Diaz at that point. So then you're faced with a moral dilemma. Someone who you respect is telling you on the record that it's not true, and then you're going to go out and report it. That makes things worse, in my opinion. Now you're just defying them. Now you're just spitting in their face. So I thought, let's cut out that awkwardness, and I'm just not going to do it anymore because they're just going to tell me not true. Now, I do believe, when talking about professional courtesy, I do believe, like, let's say, you know, I talk to Fighter X and he says, you know, the UFC told me this or that. I do believe that if you're writing an article, you must go and get both sides of the story. 100%. That is good journalism. Don't just go off one side. And quite frankly, on this site, we've made that mistake from time to time. Fighter X says something, we write an article, we don't get the other side. That's wrong. And by the way, that should go both ways. You know, everyone takes what the UFC says as gospel. Well, sometimes it's just not the truth. Chris Cyborg, Jermaine Darandami is the most recent one. Good to get both sides of the story. So I 100% believe that you should ask for their side of the story if it's a report about he said, she said, they told me this fight, 100%. But when you know that something is about to break that is that massive and is all but a done deal, I don't feel like I need that confirmation. And I feel like most journalists out there would agree with me. So I was kind of dumbfounded when that was said, and reading that now is like, it doesn't say that in any handbook. So again, Dana said to me, you know, go to Bellator. We don't want your negativity. I told him, you know, I was the one saying that 199 was better than 200. You know, I hear this a lot about the negativity. That to me is like, you know, looking at my Twitter followers, my Twitter mentions, and 99% of them are positive, and there's one person who says something bad. That's what they always focus on. I'm here traveling around the world, doing all these interviews, and for the most part, let's be honest, we're selling pay-per-views here. It all comes back to them. Like, we're out there for I love this sport. I'm not here to ruin the sport. I'm here to cover the sport. Sometimes there are not so positive questions, but let's be honest. Let's go through the history of this show and all my interviews. What are we talking about? The upcoming fights. And that just gets people to watch. That just helps them. So this idea that I'm being negative because I'm reporting this stuff early, or that I'm talking about free agency, I know that there are people in the UFC who love a good free agency story about the NFL or the NBA. What's the difference here? It's not negative. It's not vindictive. It's all sports. It's fun. It's fantasy. But to them, it's negativity. Could you imagine if I was actually writing negative things, like legitimate negative things? What would happen then? And so I told Dana that, you know, I really thank him for everything he's done for me. Again, I don't hold any ill will towards him. He's done a lot. I extended my hand to shake his hand. I think he shook it. I don't remember, to be honest, but I think he did. And I said, you know, I hate that this is happening, and I hope that at some point you will reconsider this. I understand that you're mad, and I'm not going to create a stink, but you know, I really hope that cooler heads will prevail. He then looked at Casey, who has been my videographer since 2009, my partner in crime. I think he's one of the best, not just in MMA, but in sports, and asked him if his fiance, he referred to her as his wife, but they're not married just yet, Esther Lynn, was cage side. He said yes, and Dana said that, you know, she has to leave as well. And that really bugged me because they did nothing wrong. I've been with them for a long time, and I consider them good friends, and I didn't want to see them leave and not be able to do their jobs. And I hope that this doesn't affect MMA fighting. If, you know, if it affects me, you know, I'll deal with it. But my colleagues didn't do anything wrong, and to be honest, I didn't do anything wrong. But at the end of the day, they're mad at my reporting. I'm the one. They shouldn't have to face any repercussions, in my opinion. And we've been, you know, toyed with in the past. You're in the back, you're in the front, you're in this, you're in that, no interview. Esther is the best. There's no one better than her in MMA, in boxing, and maybe in all of sports. She should have captured that moment with Michael Bisping. But it is important to note that, you know, the credential is not a right. I get that 100%. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to try to, you know, argue that I deserve that credential, that I've put in the time, that I've done the work, blah, blah, blah. No way. It's their company. And again, it goes back to what I always talk about with, you know, the UFC is not the NFL. Dana White is not Roger Goodell. They are an owner. They are Mark Cuban, James Dolan. That's who they are. They own a team. And this is their show. And if they don't like me or Mr. X or Mr. Y for whatever reason, we got to deal with that. It's not a right. I get that it's a privilege, and it has been a privilege going to all these events. No one recognized that more than me. I talk about it all the time. But you do hope at some point your work says something about who you are as a professional, and that you can go out and cover these events. And I think Esther and Casey have definitely developed that reputation. So in my mind, I was thinking, man, if he didn't come with me, would they have been out as well? You know, would Casey and Esther have had to leave as well? But, you know, I honestly didn't feel comfortable going back by myself. And so he told me to leave. Again, other things were said, not that important at this moment to go over them. I thanked him, and we went to the back. Someone followed us. Someone stayed with us as we packed all our stuff. It was disappointing. You know, Michael Bisping's music was playing, and it was just all very surreal. They watched us like we were, you know, I felt like I was being watched like I was a dog. And they watched us pack our things, and they walked us out. Like literally walked us out until we were pretty much next to our car. Just to make sure. I don't know, like, we didn't say a word to the guy who walked us out. I'd never seen him before, but it's like I wasn't going to start a fight. In fact, as we were about to go into the car, I opened Twitter, and I saw that Michael Bisping became the middleweight champion. It was just like, I can't believe this is all happening, you know? And I didn't know what to do with regards to making it public, because again, my stance in the past is not to make this stuff public. You know, there are other things on this show that I'll tell you about that I never wanted to make public, but I feel like now is the time.